Good evening. Happy Easter weekend, fellow viewers, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Unfiltered. I'm your host, Chaps McFarlane. Thank you for joining the show today. We are really excited to have you join us today, and we have an exciting show ahead of us this evening. I would like to start by, again, wishing everybody out there a happy Easter weekend. I know that many of you are looking forward to Easter in this new normal that we have with the COVID pandemic. To those who are out there on the front lines, we thank you very much for your service, and we will keep you in our prayers. To those who have contracted this pandemic and are suffering from it, we will keep you in our prayers, and we pray for speedy recovery. And to those who are taking every preventive measure available to help stem the tide of this pandemic, and also to ensure that we keep our people safe, we thank you for your continuous efforts. You can only do the best that you can given your personal circumstances. And so we encourage everybody to try doing the best they can so that we can continue to keep on track, to flatten the curve, and to ensure that we put up a strong fight. This show, Unfiltered, represents the views only of this show. The show does not, or any comments, any materials, any discussions that happen on this show do not represent the views of my employers or the employers of any of the guests that come on the show. They are solely the views and opinions of Unfiltered with Chaps McFarlane. Fellow viewers, once again, thank you. We have an exciting show. Our guest, Mr. Felix Kong, is waiting, and we will be bringing him in very shortly. But I will just go ahead and give you a little bit about our guest for today. Felix Ngalla Kongyuy has a bachelor's in business administration and a master's degree. As a former political candidate, people know him as a social justice advocate, entrepreneur, and political leader, and a not-for-profit professional. In the last 2 decades, he has co-founded successful organizations in British Columbia and Switzerland, such as the Global Peace Alliance-Surrey Society and the Baobab Inclusive Empowerment Society, which have championed extraordinary initiatives for vulnerable individuals, innovators, and families in society. Also, he has been nominated numerous times and recognized as a leading social justice activist. Some of his social services creation impacted First Nations, refugees, newcomers, immigrants, and startup businesses in Canada. He has directed teams of more than 50 employees and managed budgets above $1 million yearly. Mr. Kongyuy has built strategic relationships and businesses, not-for-profit organizations, government agencies, and he is a politician. Presently, he serves as board of director for the Canada Skin Patient Alliance, Global Peace Alliance, managing coordinator of U.S. International Center for Electoral Support, and he is the CEO of Baobab Empowerment Society. He's fluent in English, French, and German. Ladies and gentlemen, let us go right to it. Let us welcome our very good friend, Mr. Felix Kongyuy. Welcome, sir. Welcome to the show. I think your volume, your mic is off. There you are, your audio is connected.
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much for coming on. Welcome to the show. It's great to see you. You're looking good.
Yeah, thank you. You too.
Yes. So how's things over there in British Columbia?
Well, we're actually doing well. It looks like British Columbia is kind of like doing really fine. Overall in Canada, I think we've been dealing with the crisis like most parts of Canada, but so far we are doing our best, just kind of to stay grounded and people are staying home.
Right.
Even though we have some irregularities, but so far I think we've come a long way.
Absolutely, absolutely. So before you came in, I was just telling our viewers and a little bit about yourself and some of the work that you've been engaged in over the last 2 decades. So why don't we start by talking a little bit about this pandemic, since this is something that is occupying the most part of our daily lives and has changed life as we know it. Tell us a little bit about what your thoughts are with respect to the way that this pandemic is being handled by our government here in Canada.
Well, I think our government is doing really well as compared to places like the United States where, they have a lot of death rates. So, the government is taking very, very good steps to ensure that people are well supported. But I would have liked to see something implemented like, the income, providing income to everybody. I think that is something that would be very, very useful. I also think that I will be very, very happy as well if there is more done in terms of credits. Banks are still really preying hard on the very vulnerable people, and interest rates have not been cut yet in some cases. So the monetary policies, should kind of match with some of the ideas which they are putting in place right now to support people. I'm very, very much happy that they took the steps as well to support employers, with the money, the wage subsidy. But I think they should have gone far enough, like to say something like basic income, which is being implemented. Yes.
So you're talking about something like the universal basic income that so many people have talked about. I mean, it started from south of the border, but it's gradually made its way into our Canadian political discourse.
Yes, exactly. That would be very, very helpful because at least everybody will be kind of like in the middle, right? It will not be something that tomorrow we will recover, but yet there are some people who maybe be working 2 jobs. Once they lost those 2 jobs, now they will be in a very, very difficult position, right? So guaranteeing, a kind of, minimum wage for everybody or supporting everybody entirely, universally, would ensure that at least everybody is moving in the same path, right? Let it not be like some people have been thrown out. Because still yet, even though we are talking about all the subsidies and the support that is going to some companies, we still have a lot of small enterprises that are not eligible to get this money. So even though we are doing really well in terms of, like in British Columbia right now, they've come up with some support for renters, they're getting some money from the government. But I think the universal way of looking at it is to, kind of suspend all the interest rates right now. It should be mandatory. We should come up with a law that handles that aspect of it. We should also suspend things like mortgages, for people who are paying. And banks should actually be implementing the cuts that has been passed by the federal government. Because right now it's like they're not doing it. I've talked to some people that I know. They went to bank to maybe renew their mortgages, but the banks are still talking about really very high interest rates.
Right. So there is still more that could be done, as you say. And one of the other things that that has been talked about a little bit is that the policies have not really addressed the issues of students. So you have a whole lot of people who are in school who were supposed to be done school and will be re-entering the workforce for the summer. And the policies that have been put in place so far, although very far-reaching and good, doesn't capture this group of individuals because they cannot apply for the Canada emergency benefits. But also these are people that would have been graduating or would have been taking the summer holidays off and probably working a summer job or something. So those are some of the gaps that we hope are going to be addressed in the next few days. I understand Parliament is going to be sitting, I think it's tomorrow, on after the Easter holidays to try to address this issue.
Yes, exactly. They're sitting, and even though we've seen some progress there, but there's always room for growth, right? Because this is something that we are evaluating on a daily basis, and we can't just like have one solution that fits all, right? So I think it's a continuous process that the policies need to be developed, as they go. But so far, Canada is doing really well as compared to the United States and other countries in addressing this crisis.
No, you're absolutely right. Let's talk a little bit about some of the things happening in other parts of the world. In your view, how do you think, as somebody who hails from the mother continent, Africa, how do you think we're doing on that front in terms of really putting in place the measures that are going to help us fight this pandemic along with the rest of the West?
Yes, I think that this pandemic requires a kind of a global approach whereby we are also involved in the process. I was kind of really stunned that we still have some African countries that are still doubting. There's a lot of this myth which came up first of all when this thing started, that some people were thinking like, oh, a lot of African countries, a lot of Black people won't be impacted by this crisis. A lot of young people can't be impacted by this crisis. So we still have all of those things going on right there. So education is really key. That is an area which I think that, African governments should at least be working entirely with other European countries to address this issue, because they've not done enough. Also, when this thing started, it started in China from the way we know it right now. That's what we heard, right? But it looks like China was not very transparent in sharing that information as well with a lot of countries. And now then you can imagine what would happen. For example, there are people in Africa who are still thinking this thing is a myth. But it's a serious crisis. I think that African countries have not really, they've not really started tackling the issue. And you can imagine what will happen should in case, this whole thing really reaches so many parts of Mother Africa, right? It's going to be very devastating because in short, we don't have the infrastructures. We don't have a good healthcare system that might address some of these things as compared to some other Western countries. So I think that African countries need to start doing enough, to reach out and to work with the World Health Organizations, and it ought to be a kind of a universal effort, right?
Right.
And that is something which I think we all need to do our own part, to kind of stop most of this fake information which is out there, and people are talking about other different things. I just think that more needs to be done in terms of education and collaboration and coordination. It has to be a global approach.
Right.
If not, we're not going to solve this, because the thing is, what if we contain it here in the West and then people still carry it and bring it back? We are now living in a very global world, right?
Right.
So this whole thing needs to be well coordinated. I don't know how they're doing that, in terms of leaders in Canada and the US and other countries like the UK working right now, doing a lot of research and seeing how they could support each other. But I think there is something going on behind the scenes. But African response has been kind of tepid. I've not really seen African countries, apart from South Africa, that is really closing their borders.
And perhaps Ghana?
Ghana is also doing enough.
Right.
And Nigeria is still in chaos. Cameroon is still in chaos. People are still confused. People are still not sure if the disease is here. And some people are thinking like, the social distancing or physical distancing is not working. I've been talking to some people, but I can really see that there's that lack of information out there.
Right. Let's talk about one more thing, and then we'll talk more about some of the work that you have been doing and in your life.
Yes.
I know that of recent we've seen images from China that indicate that the Chinese are sort of kicking out a lot of immigrants, particularly those of African descent,
Yes.
because of this pandemic and all kinds of things related to it. What do you make of this sort of a situation? Because they are really deplorable, some of those images we see.
Yes, it is really a sad situation. I mean, I was speaking to a friend from Ghana and other different countries. I mean, their embassies are looking at this issue because, most of those people actually, it was a bilateral contract that China signed with most African countries to help so they could collaborate. Most of these people went there to teach, but now China is behaving as if, they're kind of becoming, an authoritarian regime and just throwing people out. This is a very, very sad thing. It's not actually solving the problem. It's not containing it well. And China still has a strong history in the past of, kind of discrimination and other things that happen to other different African residents there. But I have seen they've come a long way. But what we can only do is encourage them to do more in that area, because now, as I said before, we are living in a very global world, and they need us as much as we need them. They need these Africans who are there to teach their people English and to develop some parts of their countries. Some of these people who are doing low-income jobs there, they need them as much as they need Africa for trade. So it's a two-way street.
Yeah, no, that is very well said. And one of the things we want to discourage is some sort of retaliation, because there is a lot of Chinese people of Chinese descent living in Africa, in the continent, and working there and doing all kinds of things because of that bilateral, economic relationship that China has forged across many African countries. So, we want to make sure that the authorities be aware that they shouldn't do anything that will spark up some kind of xenophobic attacks or retaliations, because people are pretty upset about some of the images that have been put out there with regards to this issue.
Yes.
So let us go into some of the work that you have been doing. You're a leader, a political one. You ran for political office out there in Surrey. You ran for a councillor of the Surrey Municipal Council. Tell us about that experience as somebody, an immigrant who came here, started up, initiatives in the community and ran for councillor. And I think, there is still more in your future to do. So tell us about that experience.
Yes, that was an amazing experience. I mean, one thing that I've discovered about Canada is just the goodwilling and how people support each other. This is something that I think most of us immigrants have come to benefit from this area, from the work that they've been doing in the past. I mean, it was an amazing experience. I must say, even though we didn't win, but we did our very best. We came up with really good policies that could support schools, could support young people, could support immigrants, could build a community, could build more grassroots effort that could definitely benefit the most vulnerable in the community. I mean, it was an amazing experience just to see how people are very, very collaborative, supportive. I have just nothing but positive to say. But, although we had some, as a person of African descent, it was a little bit challenging somehow. I had some issues, dealing with people who were like, there's some parts which were a little bit xenophobic. I had some people who attacked me for no good reason. But, the way I see it is those people are just misinformed about how people, build their lives and how we should work all together, and the various contributions that people of African descent have made in this community and other different communities that came in here. So it was just some sort of misinformation that was out there. We had all this back and forth, but in essence, it was a very good experience. I think that one thing that really taught me was, if you really put your mind onto it, you can do it. It's not something which is, the problem we have is a lot of people have stepped back and they're still living in the little cocoon that like where they came from. They're still having that kind of imaginative feeling about how things ought to be done. But if you really go out there, if you put your mind onto it, you connect with people, you talk to people. I was knocking on doors, I was talking to people, I was going to churches, I was going to mosques, I was going to different organizations, I was talking to people, I had rallies with other different people, I was debating other people. It's just an amazing and positive way of exchanging ideas among people. Mm-hmm. And you grow from that. You come out, you know, learning a lot about yourself. You come out learning a lot about your community. I met a lot of great partners, which I'm still working with today. I built a lot of partnerships, which we are still working today. We're still discussing with most of them. And indeed, it was such a healthy experience. And I'm encouraging other people who are living in the diaspora to understand that now your life is here. You have to look for ways that actually you can become part of the solution. You have to look for ways that you can contribute as well, because the door is open. But you know, you need to knock before the door is open, right? You can't just sit and expect that things are going to change. You can't just be frustrated and stay in your room and expect that things are going to change one day. You have to go out there and be part of that change. And we all growing and living in this environment where we have our kids here, where we have our families, we should understand that this is now our life.
Wow, that is very powerful, and that segments right into the topic of my next question. Tell us a little bit about the Global Peace Alliance-Surrey Society.
Yes, the Global Peace Alliance-Surrey Society is a society that is here to deal with global conflicts and issues that are impacting different citizens who have come from different war-torn zone areas, just like the Southern Cameroons, just like other different parts. I co-founded that organization with one pioneer who was, an assistant deputy minister in British Columbia, and we worked together on different issues on how we can develop an organization that is addressing issues in the community, teaching people about peace, and delivering, programs that would help children as well in schools learn about peace, build a calendar on peace, and do artwork which is related to peace. It was just more or less about building the capacity of people to understand what peace is really all about and how you deal with it with yourself, and how do you understand global conflicts, and how we all can contribute to a much more peace and just society that will benefit everyone.
Right. So speaking about global peace and conflict resolution, and you mentioned the conflict in the Southern Cameroons.
Yes.
That is a conflict that has not been talked much a lot. And certainly I'm going to be inviting you in another segment that I plan to have, where it would be focused specifically on the conflict in the Cameroons. But give us a sense about how that conflict existing in this current framework of time is causing some of the problems I would see with respect to the response to this global pandemic, because that's an ongoing conflict that
Yes.
is there.
Well,
go ahead.
Yes. No, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to hear from you what your analysis is of how that conflict might be causing more problems with the response that is supposed to be directed towards this global pandemic, and also, what initiatives do you think at this time could be used to sort of facilitate conflict-ridden areas dealing with the conflict as well as this global crisis that is unfolding?
Yes, I think that's a very, very good question. We are living now in a very uncertain times, and this conflict is a conflict that has been there for years, as much as I know it, as much as my adult life, as much as I know it since when I left Cameroon, since my parents were there. This whole thing has been going on for a very, very long time. But now I think that what people need to do is people need to kind of really sit down and start reflecting on how we can build on what we've been thinking of doing for a very, very long time, which is really building that grassroots effort, building the resources that we might need. So should, in case the crisis slows down, people can really engage in, diplomacy. Mm-hmm. Diplomacy is kind of like the key to most of what I see. I understand the conflicts. I understand the arms section of the whole thing, that people are taking up arms because people get killed. But another thing that I've seen that people need to do more is, how do we start reflecting on some of the mistakes that we made in the past in terms of how we handled the entire crisis? Because to be honest, our leadership is not very, very strong. That is something we need to really build. That is something we really need to think about. What kind of leadership do we really want to have in the crisis? Do we really have leaders who are honest? Do we really have leaders who are just there because, you know, they want to be there? Are they just filling a gap? Is this just a transitional leadership that we have? So we need to look at all of those different angles. And one other aspect that we need to look at is, you know, we have a lot of issues in terms of looking at our transparency. You know, people have not been very honest how they approach this whole thing. And also, unity is a big thing. And what we've seen is a lot of confusion, and which made people like myself, who have been writing letters and talking to different MPs and trying to see how we can do a lot of that diplomatic push, we got really exhausted because there's a lot of information bombing from this side to this side. So the issue is, how do we go back? How do we work on our leadership? How do we try to see how we can build some sort of a structure? Because even though we have this crisis, there is still an opportunity right now.
Right.
If we start reflecting on some of the mistakes that we make, we start regrouping, people might come up with a much more solid solution as compared to before. Because right now, you know, you cannot expect partners right now who are dealing with COVID-19 to start addressing some of your issues that you have of an armed conflict. But what you can do now is, how do we start building some of those partnerships? How do we start collaborating with some of those governments? So what I'm saying entirely is, we need to regroup. People need to kind of look at the structures that we have. We need to restructure the whole thing. Look at ways that we can start building, you know, different systems that might be acceptable. Because we've been struggling in the past. People have been, I'm calling ourselves we, the struggle in the Southern Cameroons has been struggling. People have been struggling a lot to get the message out. It's not been going out. Maybe we're doing something which is wrong there. Maybe we're not using the right approach. So what about we step back now, reflect on some of these things, because this is a very, very serious problem. Even the last time that I was writing a letter to one MP and explaining this situation to them, they were like, I'm so surprised that this thing is not even on the news.
Right. So
there have been some serious mistakes that have been made from the past, even during the time when Siseko was in charge. This whole thing, this might be a time for us to reflect, look at the opportunities that are there, and say, and think and say, oh, maybe we need to come up with a different structure. Maybe what we've been trying has not worked, which is a normal thing that you do if you are a true leader or if you're an activist. We might have been going the different direction. So we might need to step back and say, hey, maybe we need to rebrand this whole thing. Branding is another big issue. Right. We've not branded the structure. So maybe we are talking, but talking to the wrong people. Maybe we are branding, but branding the wrong thing. So people feel like, you know what, if I jump into this ship, I might make the crisis get worse. So we might need to look at that. We might need to look out at our collaboration. We need to build more partnership. It is something that can be done. This crisis is something in the Southern Cameroons, is something which is attainable. It's not, it's a very clear case. But what I see is some of these things that I've discussed in the past are right now like flying from all over the place. Right. And people are getting mixed signals. And Europeans, our allies who are here in the West, want a very clear and cohesive message. They need a structure. They don't want people jumping like this and that. And then people get confused because what they feel is, maybe, you know, you are sending all this message up and down. You're just doing you're just doing like hide and seek. You just want to see what will happen, right? Right. You don't need a clear and cohesive message, which is well structured. You know, you can have all what you want. Either you decide to say, you know what, we are in a transitional period right now. We don't have a leader, but at least we have one person that is speaking for us. So we can do that. Or we can say, you know, we don't have any leaders, but we have different factions. Rather than having a kind of a government which is not working. You see, so there's all these things there which we need to fix. You know how the mentality in the West works.
Right.
Once you send all those mixed signals, people start feeling like, you know what, I don't know who to talk to. I'm confused, and which means maybe I can't trust the people I'm talking to. So there's some work that needs to be done, and I think when that is done, this is a time now to do that reflection. This is a time now to go back to that book, sit on the board, and say, hey, what about our messaging? What about our branding? What about our approach on the ground? What about the people who we call our leaders? Maybe those people need to go back, get themselves trained, maybe understand something, because you know what? Leadership is something that any person can learn. But the thing is, you can't force somebody to be a leader when they're not.
Right. Absolutely. And that's very well put. And that segments us into what we were going to talk about, which is leadership. And you are right that we need a transformational leadership model
Exactly.
to lead this struggle, so that this crisis can be brought to some end. Absent that, we have been dancing in the same spot now for the last 3 years. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that when we actually do a segment which focuses on how we can move beyond the conflict model and actually move to a place where we bring some kind of resolution to this crisis, be it resolving our differences among ourselves as a party to that conflict, and also helping the international community support us to achieve the aims that we seek so far. Let's talk about leadership. Again, like I said, you are a leader. Talk to us about the Baobab Inclusive Empowerment Society.
Yes, actually, I found Baobab Inclusive Empowerment Society some years ago. This was, it's a charitable organization fully registered with the federal government. And what we do there is we support young people, youth, who need, who need employment, youths who are, for example, new to Canada, and also at the same time we support children. Our main focus with children is more or less about building their capacity to integrate, their capacity to solve problems by using soccer, things like sports, because actually that's where we come from, Right. And also we did a lot of employment program. We had an employment program where we got a lot of people, even Canadians, hired in banks. We ran some employment programs which were dealing with customer service. We did one-on-one, kind of different kind of programming that people need. We supported women who are new to Canada to become entrepreneurs. A lot of women that use that program to start their own new business. We, at the same time, we work with Francophone new immigrants who were visible minorities in this community. We help them to access social services and welfare programs within the government. We did a lot of work in that, but we ran into some struggles because actually, like an organization being run by myself, we ran into some challenges in terms of funding. This is a very, very normal phenomenon, because a lot of organizations, like in British Columbia, from what that I know, there are like more than 25,000 nonprofits around the area. So you can imagine the competition which is out there to get that money. So there's just so little pie, and everybody is struggling to get it. So, but we were very, very successful in most of those things that we did. We actually created an impression in the area. We were supporting at least 300 people a year in our programming, which we did in the area, supporting children, and we expanded out. So now what we're doing is mostly STEM programming, which is very, very targeted and focused towards kids which are interested in technology, interested in coding, because we've seen that actually that is an area where a lot of young people are behind, especially visible minorities that are struggling. They don't have access to programming training and technological training like most others. So that is an area which we are in partnership with different organizations that are practicing STEM. And we've partnered with other different organizations as well that are supporting women and doing other programming for at-risk young people in the community.
So what would you say, just looking at the whole COVID-19 situation globally, but also looking at the indelible change that it's going to leave on whether it be the economic outlook of the globe, the political outlook. We were going to talk about inequality in the world. Do you think that given the responses we've seen from governments and institutions, companies, global multinational businesses, in response to COVID-19, do you think that that is going to transform the way we view and deal with inequality going forward? And if so, how?
The corporate world is always, taking advantage, of situations like this. Like I just talked before about the banks not really delivering as, with the interest rates and things of that nature. So, we are never, this is a time where people need a lot of self-discipline and self-development in terms of how we are going to deal with this crisis. Things are never going to be the same. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, what I'm cautioning people to do is to understand that there can still be an opportunity for people to do something. This might be the time when, a lot of people might need to empower themselves, unplug from the negatives, stop watching the news regularly, but then just plunge, onto things that empower them. Mm-hmm. This might be something that people need to start thinking about, because people should be hungry, for growth right now, because after this whole crisis, things are going to change a lot. But a lot of communities where we have very, very poor people and minorities which are still struggling are going to get hit really, really hard. So what I think the government should be doing is looking at how they might protect some of this group from not falling through the cracks, because it's going to get really, really rough and ugly. We don't know when this thing is going to boil down. We are thinking in Canada. We are thinking in Canada up till maybe January or maybe next year, but we don't know when this thing is going to slow down. So some policies are needed in order to kind of start addressing some of the inequalities that exist, because, like, for example, in the US, we have a lot of Black people that have been impacted because of the high rate of heart disease and other different issues, that the underlying issues that they are dealing with. But some of these issues existed in the past. It's just like here in Canada, we have a lot of First Nations groups that are still struggling because of the inequalities that exist. And we still have communities as well that are struggling because because up till now, some of the monetary, physical, and development, has not actually reached them. They are still like struggling in terms of their progress. So something needs to be done in terms of policies that will really address and deal with the issues that most of these groups are actually facing. So I see really some work there, even though we were making progress. What I'm simply saying is maybe now is the time for us as well to reflect as a country and come up with really progressive policies that go far beyond. Yes. Because if not, it's not going to do anything. It's just like we were talking before about the basic income. We have to go really far because we don't know when this whole thing is going to slow down.
Right. So I just see one of our viewers, Mr. Wesley Petit, it's a PhD candidate in political science from the University of Carleton in Ottawa. He just posted a comment which says that this proves the importance of community networks and social infrastructure in advance of emergencies. So going to what we were saying.
He nailed it.
Yes. So we are looking at a transformation that is going to happen in the way we think about community building, development, and also social support and social assistance, to put it mildly. But it took a pandemic like this for us to think outside of the box. And one of the things that I want you to comment on as somebody who ran for office is why is it that it took this for governments to start coming out now with all of these fiscal policies to stimulate the economy, to support, vulnerable populations. Meanwhile, in ordinary times, we hear constantly, oh, there's no money, we're cutting here, we're cutting there. But it seems to me that this money is there or can be printed if need be. So going forward, should citizens stand up and demand from the government more progressive policies and say, enough of this, we can't pay for this, we can't pay for that. Let us ensure that the citizens are fully supported so that they can perform at their best. What do you think about that?
Yes, absolutely. I think people should start doing more of that. We are going now into the territory of political engagement. People, the issue is that, just like you discussed before, a lot of people understand the importance of political engagement. They go out there and vote, but after that, people don't engage. People don't even talk to their MPs. People don't even talk to their local MLAs. People don't engage. And this is a very, very important thing. So we are missing out on the most important aspect of that engagement to really follow up and say, these people that we elected, we have sent them to Ottawa. We have sent them to British Columbia. Are we checking out on them to hold them accountable? This is something a lot of people are not doing. And citizens need to start because the money is there. But if we are not asking for it, if we are not demanding, we are not holding them accountable, how then do you expect them to act out? And and another issue that is there is the special interest. It's very, very big out there. A lot of them are out there lobbying these MPs, lobbying these MLAs all day long because they have special interests, they have their businesses. So what we are doing is we are not simply engaging at a very important process, which is really vital to our way of life. And then we are expecting things to change. Things won't change. We have to go out there. We have to demand for it. We have to start writing petitions. People need to start sending out petitions out there. People need to start going out there and demanding for a universal basic income, because these are things that will help people. These are things that will kind of help to balance, help to reduce the difference between the poor and the rich and all those things. But if people are not demanding, really, we have a challenge in front of us. And we have the power. It's not the other way around. We send them there to Ottawa. We send them there to those state houses to represent us. But a lot of people don't seem to understand that. Even when I was running for office, I met some people and I told them, I'm like, have you voted? They say, no, we don't vote. I asked them, then why don't you vote? He said, no, because we don't trust politicians. I'm like, you see, that's true. Many people don't trust politicians. But the moment we move away from that, the moment we move away from not engaging them, that's when we give rise to the special interest to take away most of those agenda which we want. Because I can tell you that everybody who ran for office, they all came in with good intentions. But sometimes us as citizens, we just expect them to act. These people get distracted. They are just like you and me. When you get in there, if your constituency is not holding you accountable, you might get sidelined by just some good deal and people might, things might change. So people really need to have to start engaging with them, go to their office, visit them. There's people which you call right now and say, who is your local representative? They don't know them. Why didn't you attend the meeting? Why didn't you go there to support? Why didn't you go there to volunteer? Do things like that. Do the best you can. And at least be on top of it. You can write letters if they're doing anything. Watch when they are debating in the parliament and make sure that actually that they are representing your need. There's a lot of power that people have, which they don't even know they have.
Right. Dear viewers, if you're watching, this is Unfiltered. Your host, Chaps McFarlane. Our guest, Mr. Felix Ngalla Kongyuy. He's a leader within the community here in Canada. He ran for political office. We're talking about political engagement. We've touched on the COVID-19 situation. And we're taking comments from our viewers and bringing it into the conversation. We have a comment from another viewer who's my friend, Asong Defang. He's from the US. He runs a travel agency, Ready Travel Set Go. He was on the show last week talking about how this situation has affected travel and some of the tips to people who are thinking about how to get back their monies that they spend. And this is what he said. He said, and I think this was in response to the question about how we as a global society develop a global approach. And he said, we have the brain, but the problem is using the brains to utilize our resources. And I think he was talking specifically about on the African continent. So talk to us a little bit about that, because we see some differences. We see countries like Ghana, South Africa, who are putting in some measures. And then we see countries like Cameroon who are very lackluster. And as of last week, there were folks who came on the show telling us that, you know, this physical distancing is not even something that's being respected. I mean, people are still allowed to kind of go to work, even though some people have been told to sort of work from home. And we see the numbers increasing. So what is it going to take for there to be a global approach to this problem? Because it seems as if the global north is moving at a rapid pace, but the global south, you know, they are just left to sort of deal with it the way that they feel best. You know, there's not yet been a global strategy. So you are right. By the time we've dealt with it in the north, then we turn our attention to the south, we might see a resurgence. And that has been the great fear from so many quarters. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yes, exactly. And you know, this is related to how we've been kind of like, I mean, the West needs to kind of step in as well, and African leaders need to step in. Because, for example, Cameroon, look at it. It's also a kind of a cultural thing, right? People don't react as fast enough as they were supposed to react. People also look at their culture. People look at the norms. People look at things which are reacting around them and the way they've been used to their way of life. And sometimes they feel like, you know what, this is not necessary. This is some kind of a hoax. This is just something that is coming from the West, that the West is spreading, maybe to change our way of life. But no, we are all now living in a very global world. The world is all interconnected together, whether we like it or not. We are also in that space. So I think it is high time for, you know, a lot of African countries to start seeking and asking for more help, more education on how they can educate their people. And some of our cultures too can be a barrier to how we perceive things that are coming from the West. That is where I see a lot of issues, because actually the culture, the traditions, those norms, they are still standing on the way in how we see things. We have not come to understand that the bridge has long shifted. Like I said before, we are all living in a very kind of a global economy. We are all now interconnected. We are all connected somehow.
We're global citizens.
Exactly. We are all global citizens. But for some reason, some people are still thinking like, no, because, you know, we are far in the distance. This is not going to happen. But you know what? Through your airports, people might come in sick and they might infect other people. And you don't even have enough test equipment. You don't even have enough medication to protect people. Your healthcare system is not prepared. So there's a lot which needs to be done out there. But I think that if the West wants to deliberately work on this problem, they can as well press the African countries and build some sort of standards and ask them that, oh, we are doing this here, but we expect this from you if we are going to give you foreign aid. If we are going to support you, you have to implement policies like this, like this, like this, to ensure that everybody is kind of on the same page. If not, like I said before, we will finish with it here and it's going to turn and come back again.
Thank you very much. That is very powerful. I wanted to ask you this question. What are some of the biggest challenges you faced in your own personal development as an entrepreneur, as a leader, and as a business person?
Well, some of the challenges that I've faced is actually, you know, trying to kind of get out of my own comfort zone. That was a very, very difficult thing for me, just to be honest, you know, coming here and trying to see how I can survive, you know. I mean, I lived in Switzerland for so many years, but coming here to Canada, that was another different change again for me. So I really, really struggled with how can I fit in how do I understand? How do I build a kind of a niche for myself that nobody has? But this is something personal that people really need to do. People need to understand that too often your success is where your discomfort is. This is one of the secrets that I can pass on.
Very powerful.
Yes, exactly. Don't just look at it and say, oh, you know, I can't do this. No, it's doable. Even if you go to the most racist person, you talk to them, they'll understand you. Some of them, they've got brains. Even if you feel like there is racism, there's all these challenges that we have, but there is always a window of opportunity. It just depends on how far you knock and you keep knocking.
Wow.
And people give up so easily and so quickly, and then all of a sudden they step back and just start drinking or maybe start doing something, and then forget the fact that they need to stay focused on what they want to do. You gotta ask yourself, what is your own ambition? What do you really want to accomplish where you are? This is the question a lot of people don't ask themselves. How much of energy am I going to spend on a fight which is not really important? What is my end goal? What is the bigger picture? When people start thinking like that, then things will start to change for them. It's all about how you look at things. If you see things in a way that actually is very negative, it's all going to end up being negative for you. It's just a normal, you know, things like we look at law of attraction, right? If you are attracting those kind of things, that's what will keep following you.
Right.
But I can tell you, if you've come this long way, you are very, very smart. You can do anything you want. It's all on you. It's just on you to start changing yourself, start thinking differently of the way you look at yourself, and stop limiting yourself. And, you know, just stay focused and keep going.
The power of the brain and the power of positive thoughts and perceptions is what you talk about. That is really powerful. I want to talk about something also in context of our global village that we live in. And this is about, you talked about how sometimes cultural norms, you know, stand as a barrier in terms of us, you know, getting to the same place that we can accept certain information and act on it. We had a point to talk about cultural appropriation, but I just want to ask you this. Do you think cultural appropriation is really a thing, given the interconnectedness and the global society that we have come to live in right now? You know, what are your thoughts on that? It seems like a very broad question, but for example, you know, back in the day, you know, if say for example, back in the day, you know, we had certain garments or certain sculptures or carvings that were sacred, or that were sacred to certain cultures in, for example, say Africa. But nowadays, you know, these things are being made and sold over the internet and over the web. So where is that line again? Like when we talk about cultural appropriation in a global world like we are, is it even a thing? Or what are your thoughts?
Well, that's an interesting question, Mark. I mean, you know, from the way I look at it is the world is shifting and things are changing, right? And one thing we have to do right now as global citizens is being able to accommodate as well. You know, there's always good and bad, right? But what we've got to do is we've got to siphon through, we've got to filter through, we've got to look at things that, you know, that really can help us grow and walk towards that direction, right? Because what I'm seeing is if we have things like, for example, garments that were very special in some African contexts and now they're being sold and so I think some of those things, we as the ones who have those cultures, we should be the ones leading those kind of initiatives, right? But it's because we are not doing some of it as well, then other people take advantage of it.
Right.
So I think that we need to start, you know, looking at things that we have within our reach that we can really use to enhance our culture or maybe sell our culture. It's not a wrong thing for us to sell our culture, but we should ensure that people are doing it appropriately. People should not just be taking it and playing over it because, you know, in some contexts, it means a lot to some people. and it's just like the same thing. It might be very important to some people, it might not be important to some people,
Right.
But at the same time, I think that all of us who are living in the diaspora, we should be ambassadors of our own culture. We should bring it. We should be the ones who should be leading those things,
Right.
Because I think it'll come from a natural place, and it will come from a place of respect. So if we want to be sure that we can contain things like that, we need to be part of that global structure in how those things are kind of disseminated. Because if not, then the wrong person might just pick it up and use it the wrong way. But I totally understand the context with it. Sometimes it's very painful to see, certain things, in our culture, which were highly respected, being played with around. But at the same time, what I say to myself is there something that I can pick out of it? Can I then help to correct those people who are maybe, using those things the wrong way? Can I help to contribute to ensure that people understand that there are limits in what you can do with that thing? So that is just my own perspective on it,
Right. That is a good perspective, and I share very much what you say. And I think part of it is that we have to get out of this mentality of always thinking that we can limit
exactly.
what people can use different things for, because again, there's always, like you said, two sides to everything, and we live again in a very global world where culture as we knew it, or as we formulated it to be, is very relative, right? So like you said, some people might be comfortable with you wearing whatever garment, no matter the culture. I mean, I wear garments from various cultures, and I'm comfortable doing that, and other people might not be comfortable with it. So we got to try to find a balance rather than always trying to find fault. Find ways to celebrate rather than always finding ways to clamp down and demean and denigrate or tear apart the use of something.
Absolutely, you're correct. Because we have no control over these things, and you can't point fingers at people and say, oh, they used it this way, they did it this way. But we have just no control, and we have to start seeing that as a reality. That's what we're living through nowadays. Maybe the way I'm going to use something is not the way my sister or my brother or my child would use it, right? It's going to be very, very different. So we also, as much as there are norms in this society where we live in, that people will look at things in a different way, but they have no control. Too often they'll just look at you like you do what you want to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's things like that which are happening everywhere in the world. But I think we should be not so sensitive about such things. We should learn to accept it, right? Because we are not here in the motherland. It's a completely different culture. We have to accept that. And people have different ways of looking at things. But one thing I think, which you said just like before, there's always two sides of everything, right? And we have to choose our battles. Is it worth fighting with that person in the street because they wear a garment from Cameroon that looks like that, from a chieftaincy? Or is it embracing that person and then networking with that person on something that can benefit you and your life and your own family? That's what people need to start thinking about. If that can benefit your family and can benefit you, that's the route I'm going to take. I'm not going to waste my time fighting with them because they're wearing this and that.
Mr. Felix, thank you very much. It's been a powerful hour here with you. There is actually a lot that we have to talk about, that we can talk about. But certainly I would love to have you back on the show again. One, to talk about how we move forward in terms of global conflict and peace and resolutions to those conflicts, but more importantly, to also follow up on what your next steps are in terms of your political career, and whether you think you're going to be running again for office or what you're going to be doing next. I would love very much to have you on to share those experiences. But I'll give you a chance to tell our viewers, give our viewers one final word of encouragement, given the global pandemic that we're dealing with.
Well, yeah, thank you very much, Mark, for having me. And indeed, just like I said before, this might be an opportunity for most people to reflect. Because, for example, if you're looking at it in the past, there were some people who had a job, who getting up every morning, they were feeling like, oh my God, I'm still going and doing this job. I hate this job. This might be the time for you to start reflecting on what next you're going to do. It might be an opportunity for you to start thinking about becoming an entrepreneur. It might be an opportunity for you to get yourself retrained. It might be an opportunity for you to start looking at different things which you didn't do in the past. Because this time that you're sitting in the house might be the right time for you to start retraining yourself, building your skill, building your capacity. So when things open up, you might take advantage of that. So I just think that this might be the right time for people to start empowering themselves and just stay positive, because even though it's very, very difficult, it's hard for you when you're always in the house to stay positive, but just come up with a small plan that you follow like every week. It's very simple, everything, something you do on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, get yourself a little roster in there. It looks a little bit childish, but do something that can help you stay focused. It's not that difficult to do, but once you start doing things like that every day, for example, if you had a subject that you wanted to be an expert in, you might start reading something about that every day. If you do that in the next 2 or 5 years, you can become an expert in that thing. So this is a time that, you can turn off the news, instead of listening more about people dying everywhere. You can spend that time now to start looking at opportunities that you can start to unplug, because there are skills out there that you have. You just have to dig in deeper.
Thank you very, very much. It has been a powerful conversation. To all of our viewers, thank you for joining the show. For those who have left comments, we appreciate your comments always. We are always looking to grow at Unfiltered and to improve. And so we appreciate your comments and your support. Thank you very much. And we will be back next week with another powerful show. Mr. Felix Ngalla, thank you. And please keep safe and stay well. And I know that you have a big move ahead of you, so good luck with
that. You too. Thank you so much, and you stay well, and my greetings.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, fellow viewers, that was our guest today, Mr. Felix Ngalla. Thank you. We are going to wind down now, and we will be seeing you live next Saturday for another powerful conversation. And check out our page in the following weeks to see more about what we are going to be doing next week. And also, once again, thanks to all of the frontline workers, garbage people, healthcare workers, doctors, everybody, grocery, sales, cashiers, everybody who's out there ensuring that society can continue to move in some way while we deal with this global pandemic. And as always, coming from you, I'm your host here, Chaps McFarlane. Thank you. Have a lovely Saturday evening. Happy Easter to everybody. And I look forward to seeing you next week.